And then the next level is the etheric, which is the unconscious part of ourselves, higher part of the mind. But it's also the intuitive part. This is where some people are very intuitive. They pay attention to this. And this is the last sheath or body closest to the real awareness of the individual. But there's one more level there. It's actually the sixth level. That is the deep dark border that houses, encases the psychic realms. And then the seventh level is the real universes. Now, when Paul was here, he referred to the fifth level as what he called the soul plane. And at that time, it was real. And at the time, Paul gave initiations which were real at the time because Paul was true and sincere and very honorable with everything, so it all worked accordingly. But as time went on and Paul passed, in other words, his part was done. He had set into motion the foundation, and with all these ideas, etc. And most people, they do not see the heart of the matter. They really just see the surfacey part and the outer front that is created. So anyone can create marketing ploy. It can be a benefit or it can be a detriment, and it can be very deceptive, which basically is the world today. Huge deception going on with all these agencies, etc. Huge, huge deception. Most people are afraid to see through it, and this is because of the fear-based systems that have been created here. They've been created because of fear, and no one has to fear anything. They can see through this and really free themselves. So, as Paul left, a fellow by the name of Darwin Gross was asked to step in, and if he would, take on this task of, continuing this on, and taking on the responsibility of making sure that those who had stepped up, the membership that Paul had created, that they're okay and that they can be, guided along in the physical sense. And the boys were there backing him at the time. Well, as time went on, Darwin started to become more interested in himself only, and eventually actually became an embezzler of the funds and did all kinds of funny things and was became very controlling, and etc. At some point, the boys asked him to step aside, kindly asked him to step aside. So, and this was okay. They gave him the opportunity. Darwin was like a caretaker. He was never actually stood in or given the rod of power. I myself had a lot of experiences with Darwin. I really liked Darwin. I knew him personally. I was on a building committee and many things with him. Had many experiences on the real side, but also saw him when he started to, just take things into his own hands and decided that he was more important than everybody else. And so the next fellow was prepared as a caretaker also, and his name was Harold Klemp. And I knew Harold very, very well. Harold used to be down here in Orange County, actually Costa Mesa, him and his former wife. And I was very close to Patty Simpson when I first got in 1970. I actually joined the organization in 1970. This is, Rebazar had prompted me to do so, so I read Paul's, the first book I read was The Tiger's Fang. And I figured, okay, well, this is really great. This is cool. I'll go for this. And within the first year, I was out doing public lectures because I loved this. And this was kind of like the cowboy and Indian days, you might say, of the what I call now the corporation at that time, because there was hardly anybody around. Patty was in Corona Del Mar. I used to visit her, and I first met Helen Beard. There was Archie Hurst, and my first teacher her name was Gail Reck. And so as the years went on, I was showing a lot of things that were taking place from Rebazar and the boys, which I did not tell at the time. That was to come out later, and I was not shown everything, but I was shown a lot as things progressed along. And then the transition came around 81 or so. Darwin and Harold, I was a higher initiate at the time. I went to many of the higher initiates meetings, and I remember one where Darwin and Harold were together. And I would see them on the real side, too, and Darwin was pulling his own way. And so eventually Darwin stepped aside because he'd already built a house in Oregon and already had decided to create another path called Atom, A-T-O-M, Ancient Teachings of the Master. This was his choice. He had decided to do that. And so Harold stepped in. This was announced. It stepped in, etc. They made deals behind the scenes for the membership, which most people do not know about, etc. I do. I saw what was going on. There was even lawsuits and things like this involved. This was, I wasn't following it real close at the time. I myself, I remember when my former wife and I, went out to Sedona. At the time, there was a house out there called the Wings of the Wind, and they wanted to build a spiritual temple or what out there. Well, that never came to pass. And the lady that we met out there was Helen Fry, who later on actually passed away during this lifetime. And while we were out there with her, walking the property with Darwin and several of the other people on the committee, when I came back, my wife had sprained her ankle, so she was sitting in there talking to Helen this whole time. And Helen said, well, I want to come back as your child, and this is my daughter. And so it's a very, very interesting adventure how this has all taken place. And so as this sequence in my life, this time frame passed, and then Harold stepped into the position. Harold started off fine, and one of the experiences that he expressed was with Paul on the real side. And it was like in a farmland setting because this was kind of Harold's background. He was more religious and in that type of setting, and the farm type idea, and that he was to kind of clean up the farm because of what Darwin had done and how he had influenced a lot of people, and they really needed assistance to, kind of straighten up and see things better, you might say, so that they were okay. Well, things started off fine, but there were things in the wings, you might say, behind the curtain that even Harold didn't see, and that is when Miss Joni stepped up, and she was an agent of the reptilian Kalam God with the reptilians, with the reptilian regime, and her mission was to come in, subdue, seduce, and take over Harold and the organization, or the corporation, which I call now, and this is what she's done very, very well. And so most people didn't see this, and then all of a sudden the headquarters moves to Minnesota, and this was all a plan to kind of hide out, you might say, a little bit more so, but all this was created accordingly, and it's a very interesting history, and even the design of the temple is alien design. It's reptilian design, the roof and everything, but it was justified accordingly. And just like many of the government buildings and the capitals and these cathedrals, they're basically reptilian design because these were the original invaders of the earth, and they have controlled the systems since day one. And there's a lot of shape-shifting reptilians in all walks of life here that control the planet, and this is what most people do not see. So at a certain point, and it didn't take long, where Harold was totally subdued by her, and as we go along here and we come into the present era, as I was in this since 2001 when Paul and Revizar handed me the Rod of Power, it was time to bring out the new wave. And so I went through a lot of adjustment in the beginning. It took me years, actually, to adjust to all of this and what was taking place. But at the same time, Joni was working her side and creating situations which have come to be, in other words, the priest idea. And the priest idea and religion, worshiping and praying to space gods, is from the demonic era of the reptilians. It all is. And today most people are involved in religion, and this was the opportunity that Darwin and Harold were given to expand upon what Paul had presented, but they never had the awareness. This is the difference. They took on Paul's title. Darwin and Harold were both warned, don't do that. Don't take on Paul's title. The title of the Mahanta depicted as Paul created and termed was for what is known as the 14th circle. And that was his position, that was his awareness. Paul had achieved that for himself. That was his title. Well, in comes Darwin and Harold, and they are like, a couple of captains. We'll use the military as an example. And the general has left the office, and there's the jacket sitting on the chair, wrapped around the chair. And so what they decided to do is that they were not satisfied with the master title. They decided to take on the title of the Mahanta, the living Ek master, thinking in their minds that they were equal to what Paul was aware of. And this was very obvious on the real side, or what people term as the inner worlds, because everything is exposed there. And they never had the awareness. They had gone into the real universes, but it's like a person going to Rome a few times doesn't make you a Roman, and so they had never established themselves in the real universes. And again, Harold did the same thing. He has done the same thing the last 30 years with Joni. He's created a position to where he's like a little king, and it's all about him and Joni. And so she is the puppeteer controlling everything behind the scenes, and most of the membership today cannot see this. And what they really don't see is people who come into this today, like religions, etc., is that during Paul's time, and even during Darwin's time, there was no worshiping and prayer. There were no priests and all these things. Again, this did not exist at all. And so I was the seventh initiate. I was an initiator. This is when the initiations were very real in 1990. I was the seventh initiate. And so I moved up very fast, and then Harold decided to curtail the initiations, but Rebazar was giving them to me on the real side up to the 14th circle when I took the Rod of Power in 2001. And so most people didn't know this, but at the time I also had a girlfriend, and she's in Book 2, A Journey to Real Freedom. Well, she was with me on Blue Sky Island, and for a time there, Harold and even Darwin had come, but at a certain point, Rebazar kicked him out because they had become self-absorbed, and they were actually ruining people's lives. And as Harold hooked up with Joni, she started to tap line people in their astral bodies with the reptilians, sucking the life out of them. And today, many of these people, especially as they take their fake initiations, they get more tap lines in them, and this is where they're getting illnesses and even cancers, and they don't see it. Now, Miss Ava here that I know, she was with the organization for over 30 years with the corporation. And as I met her, she started to tell me her story, what was taking place, and the control, etc. And she never really liked the religious idea either. That isn't why she joined the corporation in the first place. But she also told me about all the physical problems she was having for many, many years in the organization and all the tap lining. And then when she met me, approximately 2 years ago or so, she started doing the New You, and to date, all those things are gone. She's basically healed herself because the Hue and the Om and the Amen and these blessing ideas, these are tap lines to people. The reptilians have infected everything because they are the original alien race there, and there's many alien races on the planet. There's some really good ones, But for the most part, it has been the reptilians. They control the political system, the world systems, the monetary system, etc. But this is gradually changing. And so, but it's according to the free will of people, and if they want to wake up, for those that don't, they will stay here into future lifetimes. And it's not hard to see if anybody just takes a few moments. You look at just the last 200 years from the cowboy and Indian days to how things are now. They didn't have chemtrails then. They didn't have microwave mind-controlling devices. They didn't have HAARP. They didn't have smart meters. They didn't have pharmaceuticals, lethal vaccines. I could go on and on. Didn't have all these things, but we have them today, and it's all seemingly in a great agreement that, gee, this is all okay. Fukushima has radiated the oceans. Radiation is good. It's all good for you, etc. This is just such marketing ploy and deception, but it's purposely being controlled. There was a movie. It was all about the Kennedy assassination. It was very good. It's called Executive Action. This is one movie I'll refer to. There are so many, and we have a show called Real to Real where we go over these things. But this is a very good one. As an example, it's 1973. You can see parts of it. You can see it on YouTube, called Executive Action with Burt Lancaster. And there's one scene in there where they're talking about depopulation. And they're talking about 7 billion people in the world, and this was before the chemtrails. But the military was still gassing people and testing these things all over the world, but most people don't know that. And this was 1973, this movie came out, so they probably started it in 1970. And in the scene in there, Robert Ryan is talking to Burt Lancaster, and he's talking about depopulation and getting down the population down from approximately 7 billion to around 500 million. And this is what we're seeing today. This is the chemtrails, etc. And especially what most people don't know about, and anyone can go online and find my books about tap lining. It's all over. You can Google it. They do not see what's taking place in their astral bodies because most people have not been taught that they have more than one body. They've been one-dimensionalized to a point where people just walk the streets mainly and look at their cell phones. The society has been so robotized, and it's only going to become more so. This is where the humans are actually going to interact with the mechanics of robotism to be even more controlled, and we're seeing it. They have these devices now where you actually put on your arm and the chip and things like this to where people become more mechanicalized. And it would seem a convenience in society, but this is a prison planet. You're just in the prison yard. Whether it's the good side or the bad side, you're still in the matrix. And until you discover your real awareness, you are trapped here. And this is a huge journey to get out. The new you is the direct connection now. When I took the Rod of Power in 2001, which I now call the new wave is the new man, I have renamed that. And those people that use the idea of the Rod of Power, it's a fallacy. It no longer exists. It is no longer recognized by the real universal guides or life itself. Have nothing to do with any of this nonsense and deception. And so if people want to believe and put their faith or all these ideas that have been created into these systems, they have the right to do so. And I knew many, many higher initiates here in Southern California. And I also saw them on the real side with Joni, with reptilian Joni. You look at her close, you see her reptilian eyes. She is reptilian. And they like their little control positions, their higher initiates, their Risas, their Vahanas, whatever. And respectfully, fine. You can have whatever you like, just like the president and Congress and the senators. Most of these people are either reptilian or they're controlled by the reptilian. The main factor being the Vatican in the world. These are the puppeteers of the world, the main reptilians. And so many, many people know this, but most people really do not want to see it. The earth is simply a place that we gain experiences from until we are ready to recognize who we really are. And it takes a lot of comparison to do this. So we go through many lifetimes of what isn't real and all this characterization, you might say, from lifetime to lifetime. A lot of people get caught up in this, and that's fine, whatever. But eventually the whole idea is to recognize the all-is, the isness, life is. And this is what Rebazar in one of Paul's books, The Far Country, referred to, and it was a hint. All you can do is hint at this. People have to really wake up and recognize this for themselves. It is a recognition. It is not a place you go because all life is here and now, and all the so-called levels of life are here and now. It's a recognition is what it is. But this is what I was shown in 2001 to bring out, the is. And so for the most part, most of the world has been indoctrinated, conditioned, and trained to look to the fallacy of the gods of man and the doctrines that the reptilians have created. They've created all these doctrines, from the Bible to all the Quran to all these other things to control the masses. It's just very, very real. And anyone could prove this to themselves. It's not a matter of belief. It's not a matter of like, oh, I don't believe what Duane is saying here, and I'm not here to prove anything. Each individual must be the real risk taker. They must, risk seeing beyond what they've known in their conditioning in this matrix to better understand their own life, or they don't. It's just really that simple. That's how cut and dry it is. And just like the sun shining, there's no deception there. There's no belief, etc. There's none of these things that have been invented on the earth. And again, just look at the birds as how they are. They're not deceived, or they're, they don't bow and kneel to gods. None of so-called nature does.